you ever thought about being a private practice therapist? Well, this is for you. If you've ever thought that you want to be a private practice therapist, maybe you are a therapist, and maybe you work a 9 to 5 and you're seeing clients and you kind of see all of your friends being in private practice and you're like, well, I want to do this. Or you're maybe a student. You could even be a student in your program right now, and that might be a goal for you later on. So anywhere you are on this kind of journey to even think about being private practice, maybe you haven't even been in school yet, and you're like, "Hey, I'm thinking about being a private practice therapist." This is for you. So I'm going to talk about the journey to private practice and give you a little bit of my personal experience, but also what we often tell people who are thinking about being in private practice. So, again, I am Michelle Kais. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm in the state of Florida. And my journey is actually sometimes a little bit different than other people. Sometimes people have always wanted to be a therapist. They're like, oh, I've always wanted to do this. That is not necessarily my story. I'm just shocked sometimes that I do this for a living because as a child, it was exactly the opposite for me. I was in theater and I was in dance, and I'm like, I want to do those things. And so ultimately, I actually have a bachelor's of arts in film and media studies. I kind of during that time going into school, I saw film. I always loved films. And so I saw a lot of different types of films, and I was like, oh, I want to do that for a living. And I often took like a producer role, so helping them manage like the money and the business of actually doing the film. And I often let that directing to other people. Sometimes I would act too as well, and I love doing that. And so that ultimately led me into working in New York City. So I worked a little bit actually in a lot of different areas. So I worked in theater, I worked in advertising. I even worked for a law office for a little bit that worked a lot in the entertainment business. And I ultimately, too, was a teaching artist at one time, teaching kids in New York City, like dance and theater. And so one day, my program started to shift, and we did programs in New York City schools for families. So we would do workshops on like communication, and so I used a lot of my techniques that I used in theater and in dance, a lot of group kind of activities. And when I would use that to do a lot of these workshops. And at this time, I just felt really stifled. I didn't know if I wanted to continue to do this kind of mix of working in education and theater and film and do that. And so after doing this for probably about like 7 years, after doing it for 7 years, I ended up kind of switching focus, and I love the work that we were doing with families, and I also love the feedback that they were giving me. They said that, wow, they're learning so much. They're improving their relationship with their kids. They're noticing that these workshops are really helpful. And so ultimately, I just kind of came to a different breaking point in my life where I said, okay, I want to try something different. And I kind of came to this breaking point where I wanted to try something different. And so at this time, I decided that I wanted to leave New York City. I actually was getting married at this time. My husband and I kind of said, hey, we don't really want to live in New York City anymore. Let's move to Florida. And so I started looking at programs in Florida, and this led me to going to the University of Central Florida. They have a great program for counseling, and so I started there. Now, my ultimate goal when I started school was actually to become a private practice therapist. That is not necessarily the goal for other people. I think a lot of people I remember in my cohort were kind of like they weren't sure, or maybe they wanted to do like a work with specific population. But for me, I knew I wanted to do in private practice. I knew I wanted to do some work with families as my master's in marriage and family therapy. So I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So luckily is something I talk about a lot is that if you want to be in private practice, you need to talk about it. You need to kind of talk about it with everyone, talk about it with other therapists. If you're in your internship program, talk about it because that's essentially what happened for me. I was in my internship program. I worked in like a residential, facility, and I was talking with another therapist, and I was like, "Oh, I really want to do private practice when I graduate." And he was like, "Well, there's like another" he was like, "Well, there's another like a group practice that I could, add myself into." And so he got me in contact with the group practice owner, and we ended up just doing so he got me in contact with a private practice owner. And so we started talking and we agreed on like a what we call like a 60-40 split, which we'll talk about later on. And we agreed on that. And I just started there. And so it's important that you talk about it a lot. And we'll talk about this later on when we talk about the steps for a private practice. So I currently now have a virtual only private practice. It is a mixture of self pay and some insurances that I take. I also have a coaching and consulting business where I work a lot with ambitious moms with little ones who are really trying to find ways to put their wellness needs and their business needs first without feeling like they're neglecting their kids. I also work with therapists on really navigating their career and figuring out what the best option is for them. So, one of the things that I say is timing is so important. We want things to happen ASAP, but the thing is that sometimes life doesn't work that way. So we have to kind of be gentle with ourselves, but also be clear and focused about what our long term goals are. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my timeline and how that looked. So, as I mentioned before, I graduated in 2014, and with that, again, that ultimate goal that I was doing private practice. So I worked with the group practice, and during the day, I had a full time job. I talk about this a lot. Please make sure that you are financially planning this out because the first year is just going to be a little difficult. You are not going to have as many clients. You could, if you worked maybe in a group practice that kind of functions as more like a W 2 employee, where they already have the clients and then you're just doing that. But if you're building your own private practice, that's going to be a little bit harder to get the clients because you have to brand yourself and brand your actual private practice. So we want to just be clear and understanding that that first year in businesses might be a little difficult. So, financially, you want to set yourself up for success. So, my first year, I was had a graduate assistantship, and that graduate assistantship had like a full time job that I was working at, and I did that work from home, so it was a little bit easier for me to see clients in the evening. And I was doing a lot of work on the computer, and then I would go into the office sometimes. So it's a really great setup for me. And I think that just thinking about that, do you want to work a full time job where you are seeing clients and then you see clients in the evening, in the weekends as well? That could be a little bit much for you, but for some people, it's not. So just kind of start and kind of thinking about that and making that decision for yourself. So, what happened is that in 2000, about 2015, my husband came to me and said, there's a job in another area in Florida, and that was his dream job. And so, we decided to move about several hours away. And so this kind of changed because at that time you could not do a virtual practice. So we can do that now, but in 2016, 2015, that was not an option. So we moved, and what I decided to do was try to see if I could kind of find a job there. And then I was doing kind of commuting where I would see clients on the weekend and to see clients for like a day. And I was doing really well that I was able to kind of move a lot of my clients and I saw clients in a full day. Now, I know that might be a lot for some people, but at the time it was fine for me. But after a while of doing that, I think it was just taking a toll on me. And I knew I wanted to also increase in my licensure hours. So in the state of Florida, if you're a registered intern, you can have a private practice, but in other states, that is not necessarily the case. So at the time, I was still trying to get my internship hours so that I can get licensed. So I ultimately decided to kind of switch focus and make sure that I'm getting those licensure hours. And so I left private practice and then I decided to just take on jobs. And so during this time, I also was pregnant and I had my daughter. And I talk a lot about this on the Mommy Consultant that this changed my life. I did not expect to I was like, "Oh, I can have a kid, it's fine." Like, I work with families all the time, and little did I know that my life ultimately changed at that moment. And so managing, my career and then managing motherhood just became a little difficult for me. And so I ultimately kind of had to make a shift and just say, hey, I'm going to put private practice to the side and I'm going to create a plan for myself. And this was around 2017, 2018. I created a plan for myself that I wouldn't return back to private practice until 2022. And so I talk about this a lot. If you're a mother, setting some goals for yourself and having a clear plan for when your children are a specific age. And so usually for most children, it's going to be like from, when they're born and then like around that 3 or 4 month mark, we're going to decide whether we're going to go back to work or not. If we get that amount of time, because not everyone gets that amount of time, but I took that first 3 months to be able to give time for myself and plan to go back to work. So the other stretch of time is going to be from, that they're going to infancy, they're into toddler stage, and they're staying in that until they ultimately they're going to be in preschool, and then they're going to ultimately go into kindergarten at 5. So those kind of first 5 years is a really great time to plan what you want to do because there's a transition that happens when they go into kindergarten. So I talk a lot about this with my moms is to understand that we want to plan out the transition. And so I planned out that transition and I thought in 2022 that I would just kind of then transition to go and, work in private practice. Now, as we all know, the pandemic comes in 2020 and life changes. And that is exactly what happened for me is that life just kind of changed. And what happened was that in 2020, I said, okay, well, maybe something has to be different. I kind of have to figure out how I'm going to navigate the world, how I'm going to navigate, having my child and everything. And so in 2020, I started dabbling into 1099 positions where, I kind of would see clients on the side, starting my private practice, but seeing clients at night. And so this was a pivotal point because I did not expect like this to happen this early, but it did and ultimately led me leaving that therapist job because I was doing so well in private practice that I had to kind of keep that going. So ultimately, my dream just came a little bit earlier, and that happens in life. So let's talk about private practice. Now, a lot of times people kind of are like, well, what would you tell someone who is just starting out in private practice? The first thing that I would say is private practice blends your clinical practice with your business practices. Okay. So your clinical practices are what you were taught in school and then what you have applied into your practice, maybe in practicum, your internship, and then maybe like if you have a job too, your first job, first couple of jobs starting out. So it's going to blend that clinical practice that you have, whatever it is, your approach to clients, your theoretical practice, but it's going to blend that with your business practices. And the problem is that in school, we were not really taught that. We were not taught to be a business owner, not taught to kind of figure out how to navigate being a business owner. And so you kind of have to start being clear and understand that you're going to learn about how it is to run a business. You're gonna have to learn about taxes, learn about legal things. You're going to learn about how you're going to do your systems and have a clear system for yourself. And so that's what often gets in the way for people because they don't know what their business practices are. So start learning, you're watching this, you're learning about business, maybe watching other YouTubes, maybe getting like a business coach or a consultant also to help you. Those are some things that are going to help you move along the process. Now, the first year of private practice is going to be slow, as I mentioned. So you want to be prepared for that. You want to either set aside some money or you want to have a full time job to supplement that. So that's going to be really important because it's just going to be slow. Now, you want to also avoid negativity when you're starting out in private practice. And what I mean by that is you're going to have these like negative naysayers and they're gonna be like, "Oh, you should just like keep your job and be fine about that," or something that was told for me very early on is there are so many therapists in the state of Florida in the Orlando area at the time, so it's oversaturated, so you're not going to make it. I was dumbfounded by that because that was not my experience when I first started. There were plenty of people who wanted services, who wanted therapy. And so you just have to market yourself in a way that's going to be able to attract a lot of your clients. And you want to lean on your support system. So you want to avoid that negativity and lean on people who are going to support you the most. So you're going to say thank you to that advice to the people who are being negative, and then you want to lean in truly on that support system. And please be clear about who you want to work with and who you're going to refer out. Now, this doesn't mean that are going to kind of push other people to the side. I think there's some times where we have this vision that, or we think about private practice when we say like narrow your niche, then it's like, okay, I'm going to push other people to the side. You're going to get people, all different types of people who might ask you. But if you narrow your focus and be very clear about who you're going to work with, it's a lot about like that kind of feeling of manifestation. You're going to attract the clients that you work well with and you work best with, and are going to give you the clear change. And then you're also going to be able to refer out the clients who maybe not be the best for you, but they're going to be the best for your friend who started a private practice or a colleague that you know that started a private practice. So it's really important that, we understand that it's not only about what you know and who you want to work with, but it's also about your connections, the people that you work with, as other colleagues, because you're also going to be able to refer to them too as well, and they're going to refer back to you. So it's something that I see that is missing a lot in business. We want to kind of be in our own little world, but as a therapist, it's so important to collaborate with others. Right, we're gonna go through the steps. Now, these are just there. I have 14 down, but each step has its own special things that you're gonna kind of figure out for your own self, and you're gonna have to learn over time what works best for you. So, the first thing we want to think about is population. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier. You want to think about what's the population that you work best in. What's going to be the best, for you and then also for your clients. And you want to be clear on that. So just writing down who, you work well with, looking at your practicum, your internship, also looking at other times where you have worked with clients and seeing the best change. Because again, ultimately this is all about you working, the best so that you can create the best growth and change for your clients. You want to decide on if you're going to do part time or if you're going to do full time. So I would probably say part time is anywhere from maybe like under like doing like a 10 clients or so, like so 10 clients or under. And then when you start to get like 10 clients to 20 clients, that's going to be a little bit more like closer to to a full time. It's going to be kind of like in the middle. And then people who are like at that 20 client mark, that's gonna be full time, and some people do up to like 25 or 30. I personally don't don't do that amount. I am an EMDR trained therapist. I do a lot of work with trauma. I do a lot of work with in postpartum and moms who are dealing with, their emotions, dealing with their generational conflicts. And so a lot of that is it's just better for me to do more where it's like in that middle to that 10 to 20 where I'm providing, giving the best energy for that. So you have to be clear about what you want. And this may take some experimenting. So you might get up to 20. You might be like, wow, that's a lot for me. I want to kind of bring it down. So it's important so that you're serving your clients in the best way. You want to also decide if you're going to be virtual or you're going to be in person. So, or you can be a mix of both. So you can have in-person clients where you see people in, face to face, or you can have a virtual system as well. Right now you can have that option between those two. When you're thinking about in person, you also want to think about location. I remember when I was, when I had moved from one area to Florida to another, I went to a private practice to see if I can rent out some space because I was thinking about being in person at that time, and they said that they chose that exact location because it was close to the expressway and clients, it was easy for them to find the location, or that in the building there were like doctors or other people in the building that could refer to them. So it's important to think about location and what that's going to look like in terms of the client experience and referrals that you might get. Now you want to think about too if it's going to be a group practice like how I did in the beginning where I took a 60-40 split. So the way that 60-40 splits look like is that, 60% of that, so the client, say the client is charged like $150, the group practice is going to take 60% of that, and then you're going to take 40% of that. And then maybe they may pay you back out, the amount that you had. And that's going to be put into your like business account. So your LLC, or if you decide on a sole proprietorship as well, it's going to kind of look like that. And so you just have to decide what's best for you, or do you want to go solo and not be associated with a group practice? Because a lot of this also may go with branding. So you might want to brand yourself as, like, I don't know, the top addictions therapist or something like that. But maybe it's a group practice that is addictions, but you want to kind of stand out more and you don't want to be aligned with that group private practice. So you just have to decide what's best for you. Do you want to be more alone? And there's going to be certain positives and also like some things that might not be as well, that might not be great for you in terms of being solo, but also you could do a group practice and it might have those pros and cons too as well. So you're just going to have to decide on what's best for you, and it's okay if you switch. So like you can start off in a group practice and then, maybe after a while you're building up that confidence within yourself, and then all of a sudden you're like, hey, I want to need like renegotiate my contract, or I eventually want to kind of leave out. So it's okay to decide that for yourself. And so just you can make that decision. So we're gonna look at business entities, and we kind of can't go too much into it. But you want to think of like LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. There's a lot of legal reasons to make sure that you have an LLC. An S corp may be aligned a little bit more with like a group practice. Some solo practitioners do that due to some tax reasons that happen. What you can do is you can maybe possibly consult a lawyer, and get that free consultation. A lot of times they have a free consultation. You can also consult a CPA. So maybe you already have a CPA that you work with for your taxes every year. Maybe when you go into your tax appointment, you can just ask them some questions. Say, hey, I'm thinking about starting private practice. I'm thinking about starting like an LLC. What is that going to look like? What do you suggest? A lot of times they will answer those questions, or they might just give you a free consultation. So you can actually Ask that question and they'll get on the phone with you and kind of talk with you. So in the beginning, for some reason, I thought that, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to pay a lot, to consult with a CPA, with an accountant, or with someone who does taxes. Like, that's really not the case. A lot of times they're really willing to help you because it's also it's business for them that's going to help for their practice too as well. And so you're going to have that LLC, which is going to be like through your actual state. So in Florida, it's like SunBiz that you're going to go to, and you're going to apply for that LLC. And then you're also going to have a state and city license as well, depending on where you live. So, you're just going to have to research that in terms of your location, especially in Florida. But for Florida, you go to SunBiz, you make sure that no one has that actual name, and you can just apply for that LLC on there. You want to decide where your banking is going to go to. Sometimes there's a lot of internet options like Novo is an internet, like an app that you can have for banking. So Novo can be an option for you for banking. You can also use your local bank too and go in there and ask them and say, hey, I'm starting an LLC. How do I do banking, with you? And they'll walk you through the processes. Sometimes you have to have like an operating agreement, and then you also you will need like your documents that you have for your LLC that you got from the state. And so just make sure you have those documents and they will sit there and explain the process to you. So even within your bank, even if you're not totally sure that you want to go into your bank and bank with them, just sit down and talk with them and say, "Hey, I am doing an LLC. I'm thinking about doing an LLC. Can you walk me through the processes of opening a bank account?" And they will walk it through you. They'll even maybe have like a cheat sheet for you. So these are some free resources that are going to be helpful to you. Again, a lot of this is about just gathering information for yourself, and don't be shy about getting that information for yourself. Now you want to decide on how you're going to get clients. You want to decide on like maybe the services that you're going to do. Are you going to use social media? You don't necessarily have to. Are you going to get referrals? Maybe locally, there are some meetings that you can attend and you can kind of just talk about your business, bring your business card there. Or if you don't have business cards, just even talking about your business is going to be very helpful, but you want to have a system of a way that you're going to get clients. You also want to have how your intake form is going to be. So, a lot of systems, like for example, I use Simple Practice, and Simple Practice has all of the intake forms needed within that. And so you're going to go down each of have all the forms that you're going to need for private practice, and it'll already give that to you. And you just need to change the language on there and make sure you're just reading through it, but they've had lawyers look at a lot of these forms. They use these forms, for other clinicians. And so, again, you're just changing the language to fit your needs. You also want to think about the consultation call process. So, when you get calls, how are you going to talk through that? How are you going to, get them through that process? Because you want to make it easy for them as much as possible. Again, this is going to be your process and what you're comfortable with. Then you want to think about the process from intake to termination. So you want to think about like maybe how long does it normally take for change within your clients? What is it going to look like when you do like a treatment plan review and you kind of talk about that with your clients? So we want to have a client process that you normally go through that's going to help you, and it's also going to help your client too as you go through the process. Now, also looking at records keeping. So, again, we talked about Simple Practice as an example of an EHR system. So, it's going to have those electronic records. So, we just want to make sure that you are clear on how you're going to keep those records. Okay. I want you to comment below what step that you feel might be the one that you're not sure about. So just kind of comment below. We've gone through these steps, and one that maybe like makes you a little bit nervous and you're not sure, and maybe a stuff that you need more information on. So post that in the comments below. Right. So, where do you start? Oh, goodness. Sometimes we're unsure about where we're really truly going to start in this. I need you to first think about, why do you want to work in private practice? Why do you want to do this? I need you to think about, why do you want to work in private practice? Like, why do you want to do this? Is it the freedom that you're going to get by like being able to manage your own schedule? And the time that you can take back and be a little bit more in control of your time? Maybe you want more income. Maybe you wanna have, like, more income and you've, like, heard from these private practice clinicians who feel like, "Wow, I'm making so much money," and so that's something that you wanna be able to do. And is it maybe your dream? Is it something that you've always dreamt of, but you've been unable to do? And maybe you have like a TV model. Maybe there's a TV show that you watched. There used to be a show called Private Practice. I think it was like on NBC, and I loved watching it. And I would be like, oh, I want that. I want to have like a couple and have like clients come in and be able to talk about them. And they were in a group practice. So I thought that was really cool. So maybe there's a TV model that's going to fit you the most. Maybe the fact that it's just your business and you're like, wow, this is my business. I have some ownership. So I want you to kind of just sit down, write down, put it in the comments about, why do you want to work in private practice? Start there, because that's going to be the thing that's going to motivate you. Now, I want to know if you have any questions. You can put those questions in the chat, and you also can click the link below. And that link that you'll see will get you a free consultation. You can schedule with me. It's like for a free 15-minute consultation. Maybe you just have a question to ask. You're like, I don't know how to navigate this, or I don't know how to do this. I'm scared. It's okay, because I think we've all been there. I was there in 2014 where I was shaking in my boots, like, why am I doing, no one else is doing this. Oh my goodness. But I was really excited to move forward. And I'm just so lucky that I was able to do that. All right, this is a journey to private practice. I hope you were able to just snack some ideas, things that are going to be very helpful to you to move on in your journey of private practice. And I hope you subscribe to the Mommy Consultant. So we're giving you that information that's going to help you move forward in your life, either as a mom or right now, even as a clinician, to be able to move to your goals. All right. See you then. Subscribe to the Mommy Consultant.